Today, Christianity is the religion with the most followers in the world. But how did this religion actually begin? And that's what we're going to find out. It started not as a major religion, but as a small group within the Roman Empire. They didn't have large churches, they didn't have a powerful army, and they were often persecuted by the government. And at the center of all this was the Lord, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus was a Jew who lived in Judea. At that time, it was under the rule of the Roman Empire. Today, what was once Judea is now part of Israel and Palestine. According to most historians, Jesus really lived and was crucified by the Romans in the 1st century. It is commonly said that his death occurred between 29 and 33 AD. For Christians, the story of Jesus did not end on the cross. They believe that he rose again after dying and that he is the Son of God. His resurrection and return are part of the Christian faith. After the death of Jesus, his followers were left with a very difficult task. They had to continue his teachings even though he was no longer with them. The main ones who did this were the apostles. They were the close followers of Jesus who were personally with him while he was preaching. At first, their group was small. Most of the early Christians were also Jews. They did not yet think that they were creating a new religion for the whole world. For them, they were simply continuing their faith in the God of Israel while recognizing Jesus as the promised Messiah or Savior. They began to preach in Jerusalem and in nearby places. They told the story of the life, death, and the claimed resurrection of Jesus. But there was one man who made a great effort in spreading Christianity. His name was Paul. He was formerly known as Saul. He was a Jew and a Roman citizen who first opposed Jesus' followers. But all of this changed. According to Paul's letters in the book of Acts, his life changed after he experienced a vision while on his way to Damascus. He said that the resurrected Jesus appeared to him. From then on, Paul became one of the most important missionaries of early Christianity. A missionary is a person who travels to teach and spread their religion. Paul is important because he did not only preach to the Jews, he also taught the message of Jesus to Gentiles or people who are not Jews. This was a big change. Because of this, Christianity was no longer tied to a single race or nation. A Greek, Roman, Syrian, or anyone who believes in Jesus can become a Christian. Paul traveled to different parts of the Roman Empire. He passed through places that are now part of Turkey, Greece, Syria, Cyprus, and Italy. His journeys were not easy. He walked long distances, rode ships that could be wrecked by storms, and entered cities where missionaries could be rejected or harmed. In every place, Paul taught in homes, public places, and synagogues. When people believed, they formed a small Christian community. After Paul left, he wrote letters to these groups to answer their questions and address their problems. Some of those letters became part of the New Testament and the Bible because the Romans often used the roads and routes, and by sea the missionaries were able to travel faster. The routes built for soldiers, merchants, and officials of Rome were also used to spread Christianity. Within just a few decades, Christian communities emerged in Judea, Syria, Asia Minor, Greece, North Africa, and Rome. There are also stories about other apostles traveling to distant places. According to the tradition of Coptic Christians, Mark the Evangelist helped establish the Christian community in Alexandria, Egypt in the 1st century. From here, the Coptic Orthodox Church originated, one of the oldest Christian churches in the world. There is also a tradition that says Thomas the Apostle reached India and established Christian communities there. There are ancient Christian groups in India who believe that their faith originated from Thomas. However, there is not enough historical evidence to confirm this. As Christianity spread, stories and teachings about Jesus began to be written down. The 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the main books that tell the story of his life, teachings, death, and resurrection. They were not written at the same time. According to most scholars, they were written within the 1st century, several decades after Jesus died. Each gospel has its own way of telling the story and its own message that it wants to emphasize. Along with Paul's letters and other Christian writings, These became the foundation of the New Testament. But as the number of Christians grew, opposition against them also intensified. Christianity was not immediately banned everywhere in the Roman Empire, nor was it banned in every period. The situation varied depending on the place, ruler, and time period. However, there were emperors and local officials who punished Christians. But why? One of the problems was that many Christians refused to worship the gods of Rome and offer sacrifices for the emperor. For the government, their refusal was not just a matter of religion, but it could also be seen as a rejection of the power and unity of the empire. Because of this, there were Christians who were imprisoned, tortured, or killed because of their faith. Nevertheless, instead of disappearing completely, their religion spread even more. Many people were drawn to the message of Christianity about forgiveness, hope, life after death, and the equal value of people before God. Some Christian communities also help the poor, widows, orphans, the sick, and people without families. By the 4th century, Christians were no longer just a small and secret group. They already had leaders, priests, bishops, places of worship, and communities in many parts of the Roman Empire. And just outside Rome, there was a kingdom that made a very significant decision. According to tradition, in 301 AD, King Tiridates III of Armenia accepted Christianity. He declared it as the official religion of his kingdom. There is debate about the exact year, but Armenia is recognized as the first kingdom to officially embrace Christianity as a state religion. This showed that a religion once followed only by small and persecuted groups could now be accepted by an entire nation. But the biggest change would happen in the very heart of the Roman Empire. In 312 AD, Constantine fought for control of Rome at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. According to Christian writers, Constantine saw a vision or Christian symbol before the battle. He believed that the God of the Christians would help him win, and Constantine won. The following year, he and his fellow emperor Licinius supported what is called the Edict of Milan. This allowed Christians to worship freely and returned some properties that had been taken from them. Christianity was not yet made the official religion of the Roman Empire at that time. But eventually everything changed. After being persecuted, the Christian church began to receive protection and support from the most powerful Roman emperor. Along with the rapid growth of the church, a new problem emerged. Not all Christians shared the same beliefs about the true nature of Jesus. So in 325 AD, Constantine called the bishops to the Council of Nicaea in a place that is now part of Turkey. Here the church leaders discussed how Jesus is related to God the Father. The meeting resulted in the first form of the Nicene Creed. This is a prayer or statement of faith by Christians about God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Despite this, it did not completely end all the debates. But the Council of Nicaea showed that Christianity had come a long way. Even so, after Christianity became legal in the Roman Empire, it needed to have clear and consistent teachings. One of the most important steps in this was creating a proper Bible in the Latin language. Latin was commonly used in the Western Roman Empire, but at that time, the old Latin copies of the Bible were different from each other. There were words and parts that were not translated consistently. So St. Jerome, a Christian scholar who knew Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, was tasked to create a better version. By around 405 AD, he finished most of his work. This translation became known as the Latin Vulgate. For many centuries, this was the main Bible used by the Western Church. Many priests, monks, scholars, and church leaders in Europe read and taught from this. The Vulgate is important because it helped standardize the teachings and texts used by Western Christians. But while Christianity was growing stronger within the former Roman territory, the Western Roman Empire was collapsing. In 476 AD, the rule of the last Roman emperor in the West came to an end. Its former territory was divided into many kingdoms ruled by different groups. However, Christianity did not disappear. Instead, the churches and monasteries became some of the most stable organizations in Europe. They preserved books, taught people, helped the poor, and trained new missionaries. A monastery is a place where monks live together. They dedicate their lives to prayer, study, work, and service. From the monasteries, missionaries were sent to places that were not yet Christian. Their work was often dangerous. They had to travel to distant places, learn different languages, and face people who already had their own beliefs and traditions. The missionaries also noticed that Christianity spread more quickly when a powerful king was the first to embrace it. When the king became a Christian, his family, officials, soldiers, and many of his people would often follow. But this doesn't mean that everyone immediately believed willingly. In some kingdoms, conversion was done through orders, pressure, or force. In other places, it was gradually accepted through preaching and interaction. One of the well-known missionaries during this time was St. Patrick. In the 5th century, he went to Ireland to preach. There were already Christian communities there before he arrived, so he was not the first to bring Christianity to the island, but he played a big role in spreading it. He talked to local leaders, taught the people, and helped establish Christian communities. The old traditions of the Irish did not disappear right away. In many places, some local customs and new Christian practices gradually merged. Eventually, Ireland became an important center for learning and missionary work. Many Irish monks traveled to other parts of Europe. One of them was Columba. In 563 AD, he left Ireland and established a monastery on the small island of Iona, near western Scotland. From Iona, monks were sent out to preach to the people in Scotland and northern Britain. Meanwhile, a major change took place in Gaul, the area that is now mainly part of France. The one who ruled here was Clovis, king of the Franks. The Franks were a Germanic people who established a powerful kingdom after Rome weakened in Western Europe. Around the late 5th century, Clovis was baptized as a Catholic Christian. His decision was very important. There were other Germanic rulers who were Christians at that time, but many of them followed Arian Christianity. They had different beliefs about the relationship between Christ and God the Father. Clovis, on the other hand, embraced the type of Christianity followed by the bishops of Rome and many of the people in Gaul. Because of this, his kingdom became closer to the Catholic Church. This also helped strengthen the power of the Franks in Western Europe. In Spain, the Visigoths also followed Arian Christianity for a long time, but in 589 AD, King Record abandoned Arianism and accepted Catholic Christianity. Many nobles and church leaders in his kingdom followed him. Because of this, the religion of the Visigoth rulers became more similar to that of most of their subjects. In Britain, Christianity did not completely disappear even after the Romans left. There were already Christian communities in some parts of the island, but many of the new kingdoms established by the Anglo-Saxons still followed their old gods. In 597 AD, Pope Gregory I sent a monk named Augustine. This is not Augustine of Hippo, who lived earlier. This missionary became known as Augustine of Canterbury. He arrived in the Kingdom of Kent in southeastern Britain. The king there was Ethelbert. He had a Christian wife, so he allowed Augustine to preach. Eventually, the king was also baptized. His conversion helped spread Christianity in Kent and in other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. But the whole of England did not become Christian all at once. It took many more years. There were kings and citizens who accepted the new religion, while there were others who continued to follow their old beliefs. As Christianity spread throughout Europe, it also reached distant China. In 635 AD, a Christian leader known by the name Alopen arrived in the city of Chang'an. Chang'an was the capital of the Tang dynasty at that time and one of the largest cities in the world. Alopen and his companions most likely came from the Church of the East. It was a branch of Christianity that was strong in Persia and other parts of Asia at that time. They were welcomed by the government of Emperor Taizong. They were allowed to translate their religious texts and build places of worship. To be understood by the Chinese, the missionaries used words that were familiar to followers of Buddhism and Taoism. This does not mean that their religions became the same. They only used familiar words to make it easier to explain Christian teachings to the people in China. The Church of the East formed communities in some parts of the country, but their freedom depended on the permission of the emperor. When the government's policy changes, their protection can also disappear. While Christianity was reaching the north and east, a new religion was rapidly spreading from the Arabian Peninsula. This was Islam. Islam began in the 7th century with the preaching of Prophet Muhammad. After his death, the states led by Muslims rapidly expanded. They conquered Syria, Egypt, North Africa, Persia, and other places. Among the places they conquered was Jerusalem, a holy city for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Because of the expansion of Muslim empires, many ancient Christian communities came under the new government. The Christians in these places did not disappear right away. Under many Muslim rulers, they were allowed to continue practicing their faith, but often their status was lower than that of the Muslims. They could be made to pay a special tax and face certain restrictions. The treatment also varied depending on the ruler, place, and time. There were periods when people of different religions lived peacefully together. There were also times of intense discrimination and violence. By the early 8th century, Muslim forces had reached the Iberian Peninsula, the area that now includes Spain and Portugal. Meanwhile, a Christian kingdom in Western Europe continued to grow stronger. This was the kingdom of the Franks. Its most famous ruler was Charlemagne. He expanded his territory to cover much of present-day France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, northern Italy, and other nearby areas. He used Christianity to unite the different groups he had conquered. He built churches and monasteries. He also supported the education and training of priests. But not all conversions under his rule were peaceful. In his battles with the Saxons, there were people who were forced to be baptized. He harshly punished those who continued to resist his rule and religion. On Christmas Day, in 800 AD, Charlemagne was crowned emperor in Rome by Pope Leo III. This coronation was important because it showed that a powerful king and the pope could work together. The king provided military and political protection. The pope, on the other hand, gave religious approval to the king's rule. From then on, politics and Christianity in Western Europe became even more closely connected. But Europe did not have a single government. It still had many separate kingdoms that often fought each other. In the following centuries, Christianity spread to Denmark, Poland, Norway, Hungary, Sweden, Iceland, Greenland, and the lands of the Slavs in Eastern Europe. Once again, the conversion of rulers became important. In Denmark, King Harald Bluetooth was baptized in the 10th century. This helped strengthen Christianity in his kingdom, even though not all Danes immediately abandoned their old beliefs. In Poland, Duke Mieszko I accepted Christianity in 966 AD. Because of this, his kingdom became closer to the Christian states of Western Europe. This also helped in forming a more organized Polish state. In Hungary, King Stephen I supported the building of churches and the establishment of a Christian government. In Norway, some kings used preaching and force to replace the Old Norse religion. Missionaries from Norway also reached Iceland and Greenland. In Sweden, some communities resisted more strongly. Worship of the Old Norse gods continued there for a long time, even though some kings had already become Christians. Another of the most important conversions happened in Kiev. In 988 AD, Vladimir the Great, leader of the Kievan Rus, accepted Byzantine Christianity. The Kievan Rus was a large kingdom made up of lands that are now part of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia.
Belarus at Russia.
Vladimir was baptized, and he supported the baptism of his subjects. Because the Christianity he accepted came from the Byzantine Empire, Greek religious traditions became strong in the Kievan Rus. This is where the deep connection of Christianity to the history of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia originated. But as the religion spread, the misunderstandings between church leaders in the East and West worsened. The Western Church used Latin, and the Pope in Rome is recognized as its highest leader. The Eastern Church, on the other hand, uses Greek in many of its practices and is led by several major patriarchs. One of the most important is the Patriarch of Constantinople. There have long been disputes about the Pope's authority, ways of worship, certain words in their creed, and other church practices. In 1054 AD, there was a serious conflict between the representatives of Rome and Constantinople. This is often called the Great Schism. It wasn't as if everyone was suddenly divided in just one day. Their differences had been deepening for a long time, and the separation continued even after this. But this event became the clear symbol of the division of Christianity into two main branches. In the West, there is the Roman Catholic Church. In the East, there is the Eastern Orthodox Church. They have the same origin and share many beliefs, but their leadership is different, as well as some teachings and ways of worship. It didn't take long. The Byzantine Empire faced great danger. The Byzantine Empire was the eastern part of the former Roman Empire. Its capital was Constantinople, which is now part of Istanbul in Turkey. By the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks had conquered a large part of the Byzantine territory in Asia Minor. The Byzantine emperor asked for help from the Christian rulers in the West. In 1095 AD, Pope Urban X called on Catholics to travel to the east. The goal was to help the Byzantine Empire and take Jerusalem from Muslim rule. This was the beginning of the First Crusade. The Pope promised a religious reward and forgiveness to those who would join. Many knights, nobles, priests, and ordinary people responded. Some joined because of faith. Others were looking for land, wealth, power, or new opportunities. In 1099 AD, the Crusaders captured Jerusalem. Many Muslim and Jewish residents were killed during the conquest of the city. After this, the Crusaders established several Christian states in the eastern Mediterranean. But their victory was not permanent. Muslim rulers gradually regained the territories. By the late 13th century, the last major stronghold of the Crusaders in the region was lost. In the Iberian Peninsula, the conflict between the Christian and Muslim kingdoms lasted longer. Christian rulers gradually expanded their territory southward. This long process is called the Reconquista. It was not a single continuous war. There were periods of conflict, peace, treaties, and alliances. There were also times when Christian and Muslim rulers helped each other against their other enemies. In Northern Europe, the Crusades were also used against people who still followed their old religion. This happened especially in the Baltic region. Here, preaching, land conquest, and the expansion of power came together. In China, Catholic missionaries arrived again after many centuries. One of them was John of Monte Corvino. He traveled through Armenia, Persia, India, and China. By the late 13th century, he arrived in Canbalik, the city that would become Beijing. He established a Christian community there and eventually became archbishop. But Christianity remained small in China, and it weakened again after the rule of the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty ended. In Europe, one of the last major countries to embrace Christianity was Lithuania. In 1386 AD, Grand Duke Jogaila was baptized. He also became king of Poland and supported the spread of Catholic Christianity in Lithuania. But like in other places, the old religion of the people did not disappear immediately. It took many years before the new faith fully spread. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire continued to weaken. In 1453 AD, the Ottoman forces of Sultan Mehmed II attacked Constantinople. After a fierce siege, the city fell. The Byzantine Empire, which lasted for more than 1,000 years, was gone. Constantinople was made the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The Hagia Sophia, once the city's most important cathedral, was converted into a mosque. The Eastern Orthodox Church was still allowed to remain under Ottoman rule, but it no longer had its own Christian empire to protect it. Because of this, the leaders in Moscow began to see their kingdom as the new center of Orthodox Christianity. They called Moscow the Third Rome. For them, the first Rome was the former capital of the Roman Empire. The second was Constantinople. After the fall of Constantinople, they believed that Moscow had the duty to protect the Orthodox faith. While power was shifting in Europe and the Middle East, the ships of Portugal and Spain began to sail towards Africa, Asia, and eventually the Americas. They were not only searching for new trade routes, their journeys also aimed to expand their power and spread Catholic Christianity. In 1482, AD Portuguese explorers arrived in the Kingdom of Congo in Central Africa. They did not immediately conquer the kingdom. At first, there was an exchange of envoys, goods, knowledge, and religion. In 1491, AD King Ngizi Nzinga Anankuo was baptized, and he took the name Hwao. Some members of his family and officials were baptized with him, but the whole kingdom did not immediately become fully Christian. Some local traditions continued, and there was also opposition from other leaders. Nevertheless, the relationship between Congo and Portugal continued. At this point, Christianity was no longer found only in Europe, the Middle East, and some parts of Asia. Because of ships that could cross vast oceans, it was about to enter a new era. But along with preaching would also come conquest, slavery, and the struggle for power. So the next expansion of Christianity would not just be a story of faith. It would also become part of the shaping of faith. Empires that would change a large part of the world. In 1492, the Catholic rulers of Spain defeated the last Muslim kingdom in Granada. In the same year, Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas. This was followed by conquest by Spain and Portugal. Along with the soldiers were the Catholic missionaries. Many natives were baptized, but there were also some who were forced and forbidden to follow their old religion. Along with this was the transatlantic slave trade, where millions of Africans were forcibly brought to the Americas. So the spread of Christianity, colonialism, and slavery became interconnected. In 1517, the teachings of Ang Magashan were criticized.
17. Binatikos ni Martin.
Some practices of the Catholic Church. This was done here. Who is it? 3. That's why from Eucharisticon to the printing press, Pernit got backing from certain European rulers. In 1534, King Henry VIII broke away from Rome and established the Church of England. From there, the number of Protestants increased. Protestant groups such as Lutherans, Calvinists, Anglicans, Baptists, and Presbyterians. While Christianity was being divided in Europe, it continued to spread in Asia. Francis Xavier traveled to India, Indonesia, and Japan as a Catholic missionary. In 1565, Spain began the permanent colonization of the Philippines. The missionaries built churches, schools, and towns. Not all of the islands immediately became Christian, especially in Mindanao and Sulu. But after more than 300 years of Spanish rule, Catholic Christianity became the main religion in large parts of the Philippines. In North America, England and the Netherlands also established colonies. There were settlers who went there for religious freedom, but many Native Americans lost their land and lives. In the 18th century, there were great awakenings in Britain and North America. Here, the idea of personal faith, reading the Bible, and personal salvation became stronger. By the 19th century, more missionaries went to Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Islands. They built some schools, hospitals, and printing presses, but their work was often also connected to the expansion of European empires. In China, many Christians and missionaries were killed during the Boxer Rebellion because they were considered connected to foreign intervention. In the 20th century, communist governments in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and China suppressed religion. Many churches were closed and many believers were persecuted, but Christianity did not completely disappear. When some communist governments fell, many churches reopened. For almost 2,000 years, Christianity spread through preaching, migration, trade, the rule of kings, and conquest. There were people who willingly embraced it because of faith. But there were also times when it was imposed through laws, war, and power. Today, Christianity is still the largest religion in the world with billions of followers in the Americas, Africa, Europe, and Asia. From a small movement in the Middle East, it became a global religion that continues to influence the culture, politics, and lives of many people.